Well, good morning, and thank you again for coming. We have a case that we've been working for a couple weeks. It's obviously not near as long-term or as complicated as yesterday's Jennifer Odom case, but nonetheless, I think it's similar in some ways of an adult male being violent and trying to take advantage of young females. This particular individual really had some creative ways to abuse women, and I think you'll find it fairly interesting as we go through it. Now, I'm going to start off by telling you it's going to be a little confusing because obviously we want to be cautious not to give any information that could divulge the identity of any victim. So there are going to be two victims in this case. I'm going to call victim number one just because chronologically she met the suspect first. She is a young adult. I've been told by investigators she's very naive, but she is an adult, barely, and she's victim number one. Victim number two is absolutely a juvenile, also with some maybe some challenges that may make her mental age a little lower than a chronological age, but even chronologically, she is definitely a juvenile. She has not reached 18 yet. So those are the two victims we're talking about and a suspect. So everything will revolve around those three individuals, at least initially, and we may talk about some other victims later. But on Monday afternoon, July 10th, we received a call from a teletype from the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office to our south, a few hours south driving time, and they gave us information about a potential location for a runaway juvenile. We get those every day, and we go out and try to recover those juveniles, so that in and of itself was not unusual. But we went to the 5,000 block of Pinehurst Drive in Spring Hill, and we found the suspect, and his name is Peter Hulis. He's a 56-year-old white male. I'll talk a little bit more about him in a moment, but and we're also going to ask for the public's help when it comes to him as well. In addition to the suspect, we found a young female adult who we're going to call victim number one, as well as the missing juvenile from Charlotte County who we're going to call victim number two. We did not at the time really have any indication that either females were victims of human trafficking. So we went ahead and recovered the juvenile, and the suspect told us that he and victim number one, the person who is a young adult, were under the impression that this juvenile, the runaway juvenile, was 18 years of age and was recently kicked out of her residence. And he actually paid to have an Uber driver drive her from Charlotte County to Spring Hill. Now, the juvenile victim number two, again, the runaway from Charlotte County, was taken to a local runaway shelter here in Hernando County, waiting for her father to come and respond from Charlotte County the following day. The next day, before her father actually came, she disclosed to both the shelter workers and then shortly thereafter deputies who responded that she met our suspect and victim number one on a social media dating type platform. I'm not going to say the name of it. I debated on whether to say the name of it. It's not a common one. I had not heard of it previously, and I certainly don't want to give them any advertisement, but it was not a common social media platform that we hear about every day. It was an unusual one apparently for dating type things or sexual type things. On the Sunday evening, before the victim left home, the juvenile victim, she believed she was discussing sexual activity with the young adult victim number one, the other female in this. So the victim from Charlotte County on this app was apparently conversing with who she believed to be victim number one. It was decided that the female victim, juvenile, would travel to Hernando County and take up residency with our suspect and victim number one. The juvenile also stated she was sent a contract, and it was referred to dominant and submissive agreement by email. Now, the female victim, the juvenile, advised she didn't read the contract, but she apparently acknowledged it to our suspect and made some sort of agreement to abide by it. And we'll find out that she doesn't have the ability to do that, obviously, as a juvenile. But she confirmed that our suspect did send an Uber to pick her up and transported her to his house on July 9th, that Sunday, and she arrived about 10:30 p.m. The juvenile was provided her own bedroom and food, and our suspect and the two victims watched a movie and consumed some marijuana. The three of them eventually moved to our suspect's bedroom where they engaged in sexual activity. The juvenile victim stated that she never intended to engage in sexual activity with Hollis. Again, she thought that this was with the other young adult female victim. And this was all based on their previous discussions via this app. Victim number 2 was made aware that by accepting the terms of the contract, she must perform any sexual act as demanded by the dominant, in this case, our suspect, as she was his submissive. Now, we're probably going to provide you with a copy of the content of that. My PIO will send it out later. But the contract stated things like, and this is hard to believe, but this document serves as an agreement which defines in specific terms the relationship and interaction between two individuals, hereafter termed the submissive and dominant. The contract went on to advise what was required of both individuals, with the dominant agreeing to provide, and I quote, a beautiful home on the ocean, and a little bit of information here. Pinehurst is not anywhere near the ocean, Pinehurst Drive, but promised to provide a beautiful home on the ocean, pay for all expenses, including food and drinks, and all utilities associated with the home. And the submissive agrees to serve, obey, and please the dominant. The contract stated the submissive will always respond to the sexual needs of the dominant in any time and in any manner he sees fit. And this includes engaging in sexual activities with the dominant that might be outside her comfort zone but not painful, but she will do them as they please him. Hard to believe, but that's what the document said. The victim described how her suspect conducted sexual acts on her, and the details, of course, are not appropriate for for TV. The juvenile victim number 2 described how our suspect forced the young adult victim number 1, the one that was there with him when she arrived, he forced the adult to perform sex acts on the juvenile. And now we're starting to see some evidence that the young adult female was actually starting to become a victim of human trafficking as well. Heretofore, we didn't know that. On Monday, July 10th, on Monday, July 10th, before we became involved, the suspect and the young adult victim number 1 took the juvenile victim to a local department store where our suspect purchased clothing for the juvenile. Again, we look at this as grooming that individual, and the suspect, regulated control of cell phones by both of our victims, so he was very controlling. On Monday, July 10th, the juvenile victim was able to take several photographs, so this is the Monday after she arrived, including a photograph of our suspect as he sat on the sofa nude with his exposed genitals. Now, FDLE agent Zachary Hughes, who's to my left here on my far left, your far right, he is certified expert in human trafficking back in June of 22 by the 13th Judicial Circuit of Florida, which is Hillsborough County. We consulted him, and he was able to provide valuable support for this investigation, to include assistance with not just victim interviews from a perspective of an expert in human trafficking, but also helped us place these victims. And before I go a little bit further on what he was charged with, I'll maybe have him come up and talk a little bit about his involvement, and then I'll go on a little bit more about what occurred in the investigation. So Special Agent, or not Special Agent, I'm sorry. We're going to have our Special Agent, Assistant Special Agent in charge come up and talk a little bit about FDLE and how they work human trafficking and some of the things that they do. So I'll have you come up and speak a little bit.
Thanks, Sheriff. Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, State Attorney Bill Gladson. As I stated earlier, I'm Florida Department of Law Enforcement Assistant Special Agent in Charge Jay Scanlon. It's my privilege to be here and speak with you about this case and the incredible bravery displayed by the survivors in this case. First, I want to commend the Hernando County Sheriff's Office, their investigative team, the State Attorney's Office, and our FDLE investigative team for their outstanding work on this case. Bringing swift and fair justice is one of our main objectives, and this is achieved in part by fostering partnerships with other law enforcement agencies during multi-jurisdictional investigations like this. I do want to take a moment and focus on the courage and strength of our two survivors. Without their fortitude, the monster in this case, you heard some descriptions from the sheriff about how heinous his mindset was. He would have had the ability to continue his depraved actions and terrorize additional victims and would not have been brought to justice. This investigation, while disturbing, also highlights the partnerships and services that are in place to rescue and ultimately assist victims with their recovery as survivors. In working with them, we're able to support them with local resources to provide them shelter and recovery from this harrowing experience. It's imperative that when a victim of a human trafficking feels safe enough and can trust those helping them, they gather as much bravery as they can to speak up about what's been happening to them. Resources such as the Florida Human Trafficking Hotline and private non-governmental organizations such as Creative of Gainesville are set up to help victims of human trafficking with outreach, inpatient, and outpatient services. If you or someone you know is in danger, please don't hesitate to call the Florida Human Trafficking Hotline. That number is 855-FLA-SAFE or 855-352-7233. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Sheriff. And again, I got to really talk even a tiny bit more about Special Agent Hughes. My people said he was instrumental in getting this across the finish line, and I think you'll find out some more information here that not just looking at this as something that was happening between three people that were consenting, which they were not, but obviously these are very difficult situations. That getting people to open up is difficult at times, and Special Agent Hughes was a huge part of that, and he does such a good job. I was actually even speaking with the Attorney General a few days ago, and she had planned on being here, but she was not able to be here. But she knew him by name and knew his reputation and appreciated the work he does on human trafficking here in the state of Florida. So again, thank you for your help on that. So on Tuesday, July 11th, we were able to charge the suspect with 3 counts: unlawful sexual activity with a certain minor, meaning our second victim, unlawful use of a two-way communication device, obviously using the app, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. But the case obviously did not stop there. On Tuesday, we obtained search warrants for the suspect's residence, as well as search warrants for collection of DNA from the suspect, as well as victim number 1. Again, at that point, we weren't sure how much of a victim she was, and they were executed. The suspect and victim number 1 were interviewed, and as the investigation unfolded, it became apparent that victim number 1 was also, in fact, a victim of human trafficking by our suspect. Post Miranda, our suspect made full admissions to the sexual activity, maintaining he believed our juvenile victim to actually be over 18 years of age. He provided numerous details consistent with those reported by both victims. He also admitted to terms of the aforementioned contract, providing financial support in return for sex. He confirmed the contract was sent via his personal email account, And he also mentioned, and this is hard for me to believe, several times during the interview, how fortunate the victim was, that he provided for her, and that he benefited from the sexual contact as described in the contract. Definitely a sick individual, to say the least. Young adult victim number 1, again, the adult in this, made statements consistent with the juvenile victim. A very important point, she was not a willing participant. The juvenile thought she was coming to meet the adult female, but the adult female was not a willing participant with the second victim. She too felt obligated based on the same dominant submissive contractual agreement she made with our suspect, and she said when she attempted to refuse his request, he physically forced her to engage in cunnilingus with the victim number 2. Again, I won't go into a lot of details with that, but he actually physically forced her to engage in a sexual activity with our juvenile victim. So young adult victim number 1 advised that our suspect physically strangled the juvenile during sexual activity, and because she knew how rough our suspect could be, she actually traded places with the victim to try to keep that victim, the juvenile victim, safe. Victim number 1 stated, again, the young adult stated that the suspect was always in control of the conversations on that dating app we were talking about, and at times, often pretending to actually be the young adult female victim, except when a voice call was required. So on Thursday, July 13th, our suspect was charged with sexual battery on the young adult victim, the one who was residing with him at the time that the juvenile showed up. And this led to a no contact order by the judge during first appearance. Over the next 3 days, our suspect violated the order numerous times. He also instructed victim number 1 to drop the charges and stop speaking with law enforcement. This resulted in several additional charges of witness tampering and violation of pretrial release, in other words, contact with the victim. Further investigation revealed that while the young adult victim, number 1, again our adult, and the suspect were in the state of Colorado, they actually came here from Colorado, and we'll talk about that a little bit, our suspect arranged for multiple male subjects to engage in sexual activity with her. And I believe there might have been some money involved. Is that true? Yeah. So he actually prostituted her out while they were in Colorado. That's what our information is. And there were 2 additional suspected occurrences. And since leaving Colorado, he has lived in Miami and Hollywood and Hudson before coming to Spring Hill. It's also important to note that our suspect met our first victim, the young adult, while they both lived out west in 2 different states. And it's most likely, while I'm almost 100% certain she was a juvenile at the time they met, they met online, an online dating site, and he lured her to Colorado, groomed her and manipulated her in various ways to isolate her from her family and community. And talking with the special agent before we came in here, he says she is also, even though she is technically an adult, she's also very naive and easily manipulated. So because victim number 2 was less than 18 years of age, or is less than 18 years of age, she obviously cannot consent to either a legal or illegal commercial sex act. Therefore, the suspect was actually trafficking the victim in violation of Florida statute. Additionally, the investigation revealed at least 2 additional adult females who were formally romantically involved with our suspect. Both reported incidents where he was extremely controlling and manipulative. Both of those prior victims filed police reports due to his obsessive and harassing behavior, one resulting in his arrest and subsequent domestic violence injunction in California. So he lived, in addition to Colorado, he lived in California. A police report was found in Aurora, Colorado, where the young adult victim number 1 was the alleged victim of an abduction and sexual battery. The report was inactivated due to some conflicting statements by the victim and her becoming uncooperative with the investigation. It was later learned that our suspect was listed in the report as her father. Her cooperation, or her lack of cooperation rather, in the investigation was obviously at his behest. Now, data from his cell phone shows numerous attempted contacts with females via online dating sites, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. The examination of the information from search warrants executed on his email accounts and social media accounts are still in process, and communication has been established with the Aurora Police Department and Colorado Bureau of Investigation. They will be initiating a human trafficking investigation as well as to what occurred between Hulis and the young adult female victim number 1 while they were residing in Colorado. Now, before I go into what we're going to ask help with from our media partners, I'll turn it over to our state attorney, Bill Gladson, and then I'll also maybe have my detective, Harper, assigned to the case, come up and maybe say a few words and answer a few questions. So first, Mr. Gladson, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for your cooperation. As I said yesterday, an advocate for victims. He is not afraid to go after individuals and send them to prison. We're usually one of the top in the state, even though there are several judicial circuits much larger than ours, but sending people with serious chronic criminal histories to prison. So we appreciate that because we can't do our job without him. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Gladson. I'm the state attorney for the 5th Judicial Circuit. And listening to the sheriff give the details about this case, I think it speaks to why it's so important to educate the public and to make sure, educate the public about human trafficking and to make sure that the detectives are given the tools necessary to identify it when they're doing their investigations. And what you see today is a result of initiatives like the Attorney General's initiative about human trafficking materializing, because as we talk about it more, we are able to identify it more. I can say with certainty a case like this could have stopped short with some of the investigation ending up with a couple charges, but when people collaborate and work with other agencies and identify people that are subject matter experts like Zach Hughes, they end up seeing a bigger picture, and that's because of education. So I think it's important, and not just for law enforcement, but also for prosecutors and for the public, because human trafficking is happening way more than I think any of us realize. So it's of paramount importance. So I just want to thank the Sheriff's Office for doing such a good job. It really does make our jobs easier, and the thoughtful, slow, methodic investigation into cases gives us the evidence we need to get the convictions that we need. And that's the most important thing, as you said, in the end, removing bad people from the streets. So thank you very much,
Okay,
Sheriff.
thanks. Detective, you want to get up and say a few words?
Yeah.
And if any of you have any questions for the detective, feel free. He's probably not going to be able to say a whole lot more than we said, but go ahead.
Sums it up pretty good. My name is Detective William Harper. To start off, I want to thank FDLE and specifically Agent Hughes here. Once we received the case, it was obvious this would be something more significant than what was originally reported. It was probably going to be crossing across county lines and state lines. I was in contact with Agent Hughes, and he was here within the hour to assist in any way possible whatsoever. I would also like to take time to urge parents and young adults to be vigilant on what's occurring online, specifically with juveniles online. Specifically in this case, a young juvenile believed she was talking to one person. In reality, she was talking to a 56-year-old man. And that's something that she was unaware of. So, like I said, I urge parents to be vigilant on what your children are doing online, the juveniles are doing online, and make sure they understand that it's not always what it appears. So, any questions?
Can you talk a little bit more about the timeline for when I know you mentioned both victims as victim number 1 and victim number 2. How long had victim number 1 been with the suspect? I know they had been in different states. How long had victim number 2 been also been with?
So we were very fortunate in terms of victim number 2 because of the, as mentioned by the sheriff, the missing juvenile teletype we received. They were able to locate her via phone and sent us to the house. So we were able to respond to the house in less than 24 hours of her being there, which was fortunate. So that way we were able to stop any other activity going. I can't be too specific in terms of the other victim. Like I said, it's ongoing investigation, specifically in Colorado. but they had been together for over a year, I can say that.
And can you tell us their exact ages?
Not specifically, no ma'am.
And did the investigation lead to him with the father reporting or his daughter had run away?
Correct. Yeah, she was entered as a missing juvenile, and then the agency there sent us a teletype in terms of trying to locate her.
And was it pretty easy because she took an Uber and instantly?
Correct. And like I said, they were able to locate her via ping on her phone. They gave us the address, and when we responded, she was there.
What is it about this guy that he was able to have such an influence on this, especially the one who is over 18?
Well, specifically to this case, I can tell you he utilized victim number 1 to speak with victim number 2. There was a relationship built there while they were speaking online, and victim number 2 was able to start to gain emotions to the other victim, and he ultimately used that to his own benefit.
Is there any indication that he's been doing this for a long time, that there could be other?
Correct. So investigation's still ongoing. Last thing we want is there to be other victims out there that we have not located. So we're still going through various things. There's search warrants, going through different data. I can tell you I have spoken to several other individuals involved with him. In terms of human trafficking, as of this point, they were not involved. However, I can tell you from everyone I've talked to, they have described him as being extremely controlling and manipulative in terms of how he treats women. So.
This document, I know you said that it wasn't legal in this particular case because she was a minor, but is there any circumstances where that is a legal document, or is that always a red flag?
Well, in terms of, for charges, so you have human trafficking, obviously there's can also be prostitution. So it's for us to determine if the commercial act is occurring. It makes a difference in terms of if it's voluntary, involuntary, if it's for money, what's occurring. So it all kind of depends on that kind of situation. I can say in terms of this case, specifically with victim number 2, it was never in reference to the suspect obtaining money. This was for his own sexual benefit, and in exchange he was providing to the victim.
Along with him saying he believed that the victim number 2 was of age, does he think he was doing anything wrong in all this?
I can tell you from speaking with him, no, he believes he was in the right. As the sheriff mentioned, he stated to me multiple times that the victims should be thankful of him for what he did to them. So.
How long has the suspect been in Hernando County, as far as you can tell?
Approximately 1 week. So.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that a little bit if you. That kind of gets us into the next thing, the ask. This person had a criminal history. In 2014, Riverside, California, he had domestic battery, brandishing a firearm, injury to phone lines. He's also the respondent in several domestic violence injunctions from previous partners, including one that's still active. And then, of course, the current charges we have here in Hernando County include unlawful sexual activity with a minor, unlawful use of a two-way communication device contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and then additionally sexual battery on our first victim, the adult, and also a no contact order which resulted in witness tampering and violation of pretrial release. And then last and certainly not least, he's been charged with human trafficking. Now what does that mean? Since 1980, he has had 53 different residences. That in our business we call a clue when you move that often, and I can assure you they were not for job promotions. He was on the move constantly. That is very suspicious to us. He's also has a history of attempting as well as actually being successful in luring women and then being violent with them. So we don't have any necessarily specific information, but we certainly believe there could very well be other victims out there that because of this supposed contract, and of course you can never I don't think, and maybe Bill Gladstone could respond to this, but I don't think you can ever sign away your right to be raped. If it's against your will, it's against your will, even if you say in a contract that you're going to let a particular person do anything to you. So if there are any victims out there that had contact with this individual in California, so maybe your affiliates out there can run some information on this. Obviously, Colorado, we're already talking to the authorities out there, but he had several residences out west. And then, of course, in Florida, we know he has lived in Miami, Hollywood, as well as Hudson, and then, of course, most recently in Spring Hill. And so if there are any other victims out there anywhere in the country, we're going to investigate it alongside those partners in those other areas and help using FDLE's assistance and maybe even the FBI to make sure that every single one of victims, people that he victimized, get justice, because it's hard for me to believe that he's only had 2 victims in the last year or two, especially the fact that he was on a dating site attempting to get other women involved. And both of these women, as I said, were either naive or maybe a little bit younger than their chronological age stated. So he was certainly looking for the most vulnerable females in our society to take advantage of them. So does anybody else have any questions for me or any of our other individuals up here?
What kind of time could this suspect serve?
I'm sorry?
How long could this suspect, I don't know if the state attorney would have that answer. What kind of charges as far as time served?
They're all felonies, so again, it's going to be dependent on that, but I would say multiple years is not outside the question. And of course, again, we're not necessarily assuming we're going to have additional victims, but if there are additional victims, that will certainly, the court will frown upon that, and that will enter into the sentencing, I'm sure. So,
are both victims back with their families?
I'm sorry?
Are both victims back with their families?
I think victim number 2, the minor, is she back with her family, or is she getting treatment?
Treatment.
Treatment. I think both of them are in a safe place getting counseling and getting treatment, because they are both victims of human trafficking, and it's going to take a while for them to get them back to where they can function appropriately in our society. So.
We see kids on social media apps, these dating apps all the time. How often are you guys seeing people on these apps that are pretending to be someone else?
Well, it's constant, and I think another message that we need to get out to these young people is something that sounds exciting at first can turn that quick into something that you are, words can't even describe, horrific, terrifying, uncomfortable, painful, doing things that, because that's the, this person was violent, you might even say sadistic, and things can turn on a dime. And when you're young, you don't think about those things. You just think about the excitement until you're in the middle of it. And I hope our young people and parents, because this app, again, I don't want to give them any advertisement, but I had not, and I asked a couple of my commanders, they had not heard of this app either. So there are probably hundreds of apps out there, famous and not so famous apps, that can be used for this. So, parents, we have to remember that as parents, we are not our children's friends. We are their parents. And no matter how much it upsets them, if we can keep them from getting involved in this, it'll be well worth it when both the parents and the children look back and realized that they were going down the wrong road, and the parents put their foot down. And I think, frankly, most kids want boundaries, despite how angry they get when you give them. So parents, I don't think you can do too much. Kids will call it spying. As a parent, I consider it protection. And I think you can't state that enough. So, all right, anything else? We're going to get you, I think, the narrative of that contract. I think I probably read a lot of it, but there may be some more of it that might even be more outrageous and shocking, that somebody would actually think to use that in their criminal activity. So, anything else?
Is that house that it happened at, that wasn't his permit, he didn't own that house?
I'm sorry, was that house what?
He was just renting that house?
Yeah, he was moving around a lot. Yes, he was moving around a lot. So that, again, that is very suspicious in our eyes. So he was probably running from some things, and maybe even some victims, hoping if he got out of the area. Again, we don't have any information on that. I want to be very clear, but if anybody recognizes this picture, as either someone who did something to them or attempted to do something, we certainly would like to make that part of the case. So again, we appreciate our media partners getting this information out, and if anybody has anything on this specific case, they can call the sheriff's office and ask for Detective Harper. He'll be happy to make it part of the investigation. Thank you all very much and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you again. Appreciate it.